Are you scared of leaving that toxic job? Let's talk about it. I want to talk about the fears of leaving a toxic job because even a job might be toxic, you can't stand it, all those things, but it's not easy just to up and leave a job. It's not easy at all. And I want to say that because I've been there and I know what it's like, the fears of leaving a toxic job. You can't stand it, whatever, but you may be thinking about, I got bills to pay. What am I going to do? How am I going to replace my income? What is it about my health insurance, my retirement? You're probably thinking about very serious considerations. Okay. So I just want to normalize that what you're feeling is very normal. And I also want to say that there's a way out and there's a way to walk through the fear. So, first, I want to normalize that the fear is normal. It is a normal reaction that when you're making a big life change, such as a job change or leaving a job, that brings up a lot of anxiety. So, it's okay to feel the fear. What I want, and I hope that you're able to get out of this conversation today, is feeling the fear. Recognizing the fear doesn't mean stop and don't move forward. Recognizing the fear may mean, okay, let's get your plan together. Okay. So we're going to have a different understanding of fear and ways to address the fear of leaving a toxic job. So you're able to prepare, so you can prepare and pivot to leave out that job and go to better professional opportunities. Okay. Not just leave and be like, oh, I hope everything gonna be okay. No, we're talking about planning so that you can end up in a better professional situation. So if you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a toxic job survivor, but more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. I'm also the co-creator with Mercer Price of the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black women. So everyone, thank you so much for joining in. I want to say a special hello to my guest, who is my Spelman sister. Spelman.
Yes.
So Dr. Gia, if you could introduce yourself. And I just want to say again, you are in for a treat that you have two Black women, licensed clinical psychologists who are also toxic job survivors. So we have been through what we are talking about right now. We work with Black women, we've had the experience, so we know what we're talking about. So Dr. Gia, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for that warm opportunity to join you and to be part of your audience today. I'm Dr. Gia Washington Rito. I'm a licensed psychologist by training, and I'm an executive coach by my current trade. I'm definitely someone who has navigated several different kinds of toxic cultures in the workplace, but I also have specialized training in industrial organizational psychology. So I'm an IO, what we call an IO practitioner. So in my coaching, I help other women navigate toxic cultures, make decisions about what they would like to do next, and do some long-term planning.
Yes, I appreciate that, Dr. Gia. So we're going to be talking about not only pivoting, but what can you do while you're still in the workplace? So when you're in the workplace, you might be thinking about leaving, but you can't just up and leave. So we're going to be talking about what are some of the strategies for you as you are still in the working environment and working your exit plan. Nobody needs to know about your exit plan, but while you are working on your exit plan, what are some ways that you could still maintain your wellness, your sanity through the process? So Dr. Gia, can we talk about what are some of the fears that many Black women encounter in toxic jobs? Because unfortunately, we know that as Black women, we have higher rates of experiencing toxic jobs because of racism and sexism. So we might go from one toxic job to the next, to next, to next. So even if the job is toxic, what keeps many of us there at these jobs?
Absolutely. Great way for us to start and focus and hone in on some of those fears. I think a lot of times what I'll hear is that there are concerns about finances. Will I have enough? If I lose this job, what does that mean? Or if I leave this job, what does that mean financially? That's usually one of the big things. But a couple of other things that I think come up that are really important are the idea that we might have been making a mistake. Like I'm choosing the wrong thing, or I've gotten years and years of training for this particular role. Was that a mistake? And will I make the same mistake again? Also, sometimes that fear of judgment, what other people will think about our decision of leaving this job, what it means for those people in our family or in our close relationships for us to have this job or this title, even though it might be damaging us in some ways to be in this continued toxic culture. And then
Mhm.
another fear sometimes I think is the loss of identity. Sometimes we can get
Mhm.
very much intertwined with the identity of our jobs, even though we know and understand that we are far more than our job title or our role. But it can be really important and cloud our judgment or cloud our ability to choose the next thing sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So all those things, when we think about finances, that's a very practical survival issue that many of us get stuck because we think, well, I don't even know where I would make the money. I got a lot of bills. I got all these responsibilities. So we're going to talk about some resources about the finances, but also can we drill down a little bit about the fear of judgment,
Yeah.
particularly of people around us who they may say, "Oh, you got that good job, those good benefits. Why would you leave that job? What's wrong with you, girl? Why'd you leave that job?" Okay. So I want to
Exactly.
talk about that and how people might project their fears onto us. I know
Yes.
I experienced that. And so it's like, and I'll talk about this with other Black women too, that many times Black people who of an older generation, particularly the
Mhm.
baby boomers, they are like, girl, you get that job, that good job, you stay there, you get that pension, you do all the things, but you just don't cause any problems or whatever. They cannot understand why you
Mhm.
would leave that so-called good job with the good benefits, with the good retirement packages. They don't understand, okay?
Right.
And so I've been very transparent with talking about my own experiences. My mother did not
Mhm.
understand that. And
Mhm.
so I had to make a decision of not telling her about my plans to leave a toxic job because I knew she would try to convince me to
Yeah.
stay. So, can we talk a little bit about how other people project their fears onto us and
Yes.
then how that can then impact us with staying in a job that's harming us?
Absolutely. All the things that you said are absolutely true, and I think are real experiences for a lot of women in these toxic jobs or toxic
Mhm.
cultures. And it's a reality that,
Yeah,
again, the people around us simply usually are saying these things because, with the best of intentions, they want what they believe is the best for us, right?
yes,
You have
yes.
this good job, you've got this good benefit. Why would you even want more? Partly because, especially if it's someone older than us, like a boomer or someone from the silent generation, they maybe didn't even have an opportunity to think about their job in that way. You just went
Right,
to work, right? You went to
right.
work, you did what you needed to do, and you came home. And all of that maybe fulfillment you got from outside of work and your
Mm,
family, your friends, etc. And culture has changed now, right? The
mhm,
expectation that we have fulfillment and a lot of positive feelings about our jobs, our work.
mhm,
That's maybe newer to this generation or the generations behind us.
mhm,
So I think that that is really important. I think you have to be sometimes, just like you said, very careful about who you share your plans with.
mhm.
Because, sometimes people will try to talk you out of things that they simply don't see for themselves, or they
Right,
simply don't see the end result or the outcome, right? No
right.
one is going to think it's a good idea until they see you do it successfully.
Right, right, and they still can't believe it. They still can't believe it, right?
Right.
So, the other part you talked about was that for many of us, our job and our identity have become
Mhm.
fused.
Absolutely.
And I've noticed this with a lot of Black women that I meet for the first time, and we exchange names, and one of the next things that they talk about is what do they do for a living, and they ask me what I do for a living.
Mhm.
And that part about identity becoming fused,
Yeah.
can you speak a little bit about why that might happen for some Black women and who might be more at risk for their identity becomes so wrapped up into their job position?
That's a great, great question. And I think that could apply mostly to people who have very, very highly skilled, highly technical jobs, jobs that it took them years to develop the skill level, knowledge, and ability to do well. They've
Mm-hmm.
maybe put in a lot of finances into their training. A lot of people have spent a lot of time encouraging them and maybe even contributed to their education. And in that sense, over all of those years, their focus has narrowed into this specific role,
Mm-hmm.
and they're with their focus being narrow, they just see what's in front of them and
Yeah.
then start to incorporate their social life, their friends, their acquaintances, mentors, champions, all these people who are somehow tied to this particular role. And so it is difficult to see outside of that, right? Or
Yeah.
to see themselves as being in another role, in another city, in another job or another environment. It can be really challenging. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it's impossible. It just
Right.
may be challenging.
Right. Right. And I'm wondering, are there any? maybe some psychological, maybe blind spots that some people might have that make them more likely or more at risk to over-identify with their job. So I'm thinking about like unresolved childhood trauma
Mhm.
or maybe, receiving very negative feedback when they were growing up or in their educational background and always having to prove things. And
Right.
so they get this job and it makes them feel like they have status. And
Exactly.
so having that status could feel like a void. So there might be other voids that they have in their lives or other unresolved issues they might have in their lives. That's why their job is so important to them. So that's why I think therapy is so important. you know,
Absolutely.
when you're in a toxic job, that you're able to talk to a therapist about these issues because it may reveal there's
Mhm.
some deeper issues going on that's contributing to why this job is like the be all end all. Like you said, Dr. Gia,
Yeah.
like your whole, not only the job, but all your friends might be there or your so called friends. Everything revolves around the job.
Absolutely. And then too, to your point about there even being some childhood trauma or some childhood exposure, that can start very early. You can think about maybe like a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old who gets reinforced for saying they want to be a doctor, as
Right.
opposed to someone just saying they want to be a dancer. Now,
Right.
if your community is one of artists and creatives and dancers, then certainly that would be reinforced. But if
Yeah.
your community is one of academics and teachers and such, then like the aspiration of being a doctor is what is reinforced and validated as they go through, their life and education. And they keep hearing that message. You can do it, you can do it, you should do it. You're the
Yeah.
right person for this, right? Certain skills and abilities keep being validated. And before long, they think that that's the only thing that they can contribute to the world. And that's not true.
Mm,
It's
true.
so
And if they get the message like you're the one or the only that made it,
yes.
so you can't leave because there's no representation of us. So now
Right.
you have that pressure. Now let's talk a little bit more about the fear. So I wanted to talk about the fear
Mhm.
because so many of us experience it and I want to normalize it. So I want to be able to talk about the fear. Many of us experience it. We might feel like kind of stuck by the fear, but we
Right.
don't talk about it. We feel that as Black women, we are strong. We
Mhm.
don't let
Mhm.
people know that we're scared of things, that we can handle it. We got this, all those things. And we do. We got this.
Right.
We're strong. We got all those things. We are those things. And we
Mhm.
also experience fear. And
Yes.
fear can show up in different ways. What are some of the ways that fear can show up for us as Black women in relation to a toxic job? Like, how might it be manifested in different ways?
Mhm. I think a lot of ways it can be manifested, but maybe some of the primary ways will be in this decision making or this idea about leaving when you're confronted with the fear of the unknown. What will this be like? Who will I be without this job or without this role? Or even
Mm,
the fear of unfamiliar. Maybe you've been making decisions that have worked like clockwork and gotten you into this position, and it's been sequential. You've moved up the ladder. Now, all of a
yeah.
sudden, you're dealing with a toxic environment or thoughts and feelings that feel like this isn't the right fit anymore. And that is completely unfamiliar, right,
Mhm.
to you.
Uh-huh.
And that
Yeah.
is really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we might just try to push it away and say, oh, I can deal with this. And then I think sometimes too, also that fear of not being successful, not proving to everyone that you can withstand this toxic culture,
Oh,
that you're
oh,
tougher,
oh, oh.
you're better, that you can do it
Yes.
all, right? That you're the super Black woman. That can be
Yes.
really intense as well. That could be a lot of
Oh,
us. Mhm.
girl. Yes. Okay. You got me excited with that one. Everybody also please thumbs up for the video. Okay. So YouTube knows to suggest this video to other Black women. Thank you, Colette Elizabeth. So the part about you're not gonna run me out of here. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
not weak. I'm gonna show these people. And the people around us can get caught up in that stuff too. Like, girl, don't let them run you out of
Mhm.
here. Don't let them do that to you. Don't let them. And so then you feel like a sense of pressure or that you're letting people down or they're gonna think less of you if
Yes.
you make the decision to leave as opposed to thinking of it. And my friend Colette Elizabeth said this, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. But for
Yes.
us, we've been trained that we are
Mhm.
strong, we fight, we don't let people run us out of good situations. We're not going to do that. I've even heard people, Black women say, I deserve to be here. I have every right to be here. I deserve to be here.
Mhm.
And I think, okay, yes, you do. And you are
Right.
still being harmed, and this is not a good environment for you. So how can Black women walk through those like mind trips, right? So the fearing of, oh my God, what are people going to think of me? Or does this mean I'm a weak person? Does this mean something about me? Or this one too, all jobs are toxic, so I might as well just stay with this one. The devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. So, I might as well just stick it out. So how can we deal with that? Because what I've seen and what I've experienced, and I just wanted to share a little bit that when I was in that toxic job, I was beating myself up so much about why can't I just go? Why can't I just go? I know I don't want to be here. It's very clear I don't want to be here, right? And I just felt kind of weak that I could not make that final, like, I'm out of here, even though there were all these signs, even though I had exit planned, I had done all those, I got taken a leave of absence. I still couldn't make that final jump. I just couldn't do it. And I was just beating myself up about why I couldn't do that. But what I think is important is that, and I want to share my story because other Black women may be beating yourself up too. And it's not helpful, but to know it's a process. So just like once you leave a toxic job and you start healing, that is a process. Getting ready to leave a toxic job, it's a process, particularly if you do it well. Okay.
Right.
So if you do it well and you're able to plan and get resources and pivot to something better, that's a process. Okay. And so we need to be open to the process. And for me, I was like, oh my God, I know I got to get out of here. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start. But this is what the mind trip is when you're at the toxic jobs, because at the toxic job, they will send some message to you that you're lucky to have this job, that it's really hard to get another job.
Right.
You won't get a job like this again. This is a great job. Like, so they start putting all these fears in your head. Right? I thought the side I go, right.
Right. Part of the toxicity. Right.
This part of toxicity, right? So you start believing it. And then you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Even though for you to even get that job, even though I had got that job, I was a licensed clinical psychologist already. That did not click for me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that I had all these credentials and all that kind of stuff before I even got to the job didn't make me.
Right.
But I was still tripped up about like, oh my God, what's going to happen? How can I find another job? And I think a lot of us fall into this trap where the job is the toxicity, like you said, it's a toxic environment telling you you can never go. It's scary out there. You should be lucky to have this job. And so we start believing that. And so for me, it was, okay, I know I got to get out of here. I know I'm starting to experience all these symptoms, physical and psychological symptoms. I got to get out of here.
Right.
So for me, I connected to resources. I knew I had to get resources together, not only in therapy, but also I started working with a Black woman financial psychologist to get my financial exit together. And heads up, everybody, we're going to do another financial masterclass with Dr. Roche Brown, who's a financial psychologist. That's January 8th and 9th. So if you want more information about that or to get on the waiting list for that, that'll be in the description section. So for me, I was like, okay, I got to get ready. Right?
Yes.
And it was a process. It was so difficult for me. But as I was going through the process, Dr. Gia, I was continuing to experience harm. More weight gain, high blood pressure, hair continuing to fall out, headaches, stomach ache, difficulty sleeping, dread, like all those things I experienced. So can you speak to what other Black women that you have worked with, what are some of the ways that fear may show up or has shown up in their lives?
Absolutely. So many things that you said are so important. So a couple of things I just want to highlight. The idea that if we make a different decision that doesn't reflect what the people at the toxic job want you to do, and somehow we are weak, right? Like that's a lot of mindset kind of hokey pokey stuff that's happening. And that is just an error. It's an error in thinking. It's an error in listening to this certain propaganda. Because just like you were saying, thinking about what's happening, confronting the reality, asking yourself these questions, doing it in therapy or in coaching, all of that comes together to help set up a toolbox or a box of resources for you to be able to navigate this.
Yeah.
Because you have to ask yourself, if I continue to be in this toxic role and I know that I'm getting sick and I know that this isn't worth it, who is this serving? It's not serving me because I'm starting to see the physical effects, let alone the emotional and psychological effects of this, right? But I'm starting to see the physical effects and I know that this isn't serving me. So who is it benefiting? It's
Girl.
probably benefiting the person that's gotten you convinced that you should be grateful for the job that you earned.
Right.
Well, sure. Yes, in the heavenly. Let's be grateful for the job that we
Right.
have. But that doesn't mean that we have to stay there and continue to take abuse if it is
Right.
not a great fit, or that we can't contribute to the world in some other way. And that
Mhm.
is just propaganda. That is just a mindset that we can change in therapy
Yeah.
and coaching.
Yeah. So basically, it's interesting you said mind hokey doke. I call it a mind F. It's
Yeah.
like they get into your mind and trying to mess you over. And it's kind of like they want you to go for the okey doke. Like, oh no, this is an excellent job. Or maybe you just need to work harder. Or it maybe next year you get that promotion. Or maybe, whatever. But
Lean
we
in
know.
and do a little bit more. What?
Exactly. And I love what you said, Dr. Gia. Who is benefiting from this? Who is benefiting from this? And I think it will be helpful too. I'm going to give a tip to Black women if you're watching this right now and you're trying to figure out, should I stay? Should I go? I can't figure it out. Do a list of the costs and benefits of being at that job. Okay. And be honest. Don't sugarcoat anything. Be real about what are the true costs of you being at that job, and not only your costs, your physical, psychological costs, but also maybe the cost to your family of you being at that, or your friends if you've been at a toxic job. Are you just a shell of a person because you're at the job? So again, the fears are normal. The fears are normal. What I want you to hear, if you are in a toxic job right now and you want to go, what I want you to really hear is not only is it normal, but you are able to walk through the fears. Because if you don't, you will stay there and you will feel stuck. And then you will start beating yourself up. And the longer you're there, the more you're going to be harmed. Okay. So even though it's scary, it's necessary. Okay. And you know what's best for you. Nobody's telling you to leave or not, but you need to make that decision for yourself and for your family, what is best for you. Look at the costs and benefits of being there and knowing that you are able to leave that job and you can pivot to something better. You can. I've interviewed so many Black women and they've left toxic jobs. Not one has ever said I regretted it. Not one. And they're all doing better, including myself. Okay. So I want you to see our examples so you know what's possible. So Dr. Gia, we talked about the importance of planning, right? So again, I tell Black women, if you could take a leave of absence from your job, please do so. Please do so. Get some rest.
Yeah.
You can start planning. You can start, get that clarity, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So while you're on a leave of absence, this is what I did. I started exit planning, work with Dr. Roche Brown, get my money stuff together, replace my income. I did the whole thing. Okay. Right. So I had the benefit that I was away from the job, right? So what tips can you give to Black women who are still at the job? Let's say they can't take that leave of absence. If they're still at the job, preparing for their exit. Again, don't tell nobody at the job, please, nobody, okay? Don't do that because you never know what the coworker's going to do.
That's true.
Let Elizabeth talked about, she was in upper management and coworkers will come report on their so-called best friends at the job all the time. So don't do that, okay? So what would you say, or how can Black women kind of cope or even develop like this psychological armoring as they go into these toxic, hostile workplaces while they're getting their exit plan together? So what can Black women do?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you're asking this. I know this is sort of the high point of our conversation. So many things, right? And you can think about, like, in terms of a wellness plan, what works best for you. I can give you a quick example, and then we'll get into psychological armoring. So as a quick example, I remember feeling quite depleted. I mean, just depleted by the end of the week, dealing with a toxic culture, right?
Yes.
And I knew in my heart of hearts that if I could make it to Thursday, on time, work done, everything, I would reward myself with something Thursday night. So
Wow.
for about 18 months, I got into the habit of Thursday after work, I wouldn't go home. I'd go straight out. Whether I was with friends, whether I was on a date, whether I was by myself, I was going out and I would go to a restaurant, explore a different place, usually in the city of Houston, sit at the bar, have maybe one drink, one conversation with someone sitting next to me or someone, who's a bartender, and then I would go home. That was my reward because what I was starting to do was being weathered psychologically by the toxic culture. And I would want to leave, come home and go straight to sleep. And before I knew it, most of my social time was in this toxic culture. And that was not serving me, right? So I had to make a deliberate effort. And it's something that felt like a reward, something that felt like an adventure, an opportunity for me to learn. I would position myself to do something completely different. And I loved it because I had an opportunity to meet with people, talk to people I would not have ever typically have spoken to. It led to other opportunities, other professional development opportunities, and a change in my mindset. So things like that, I think, can make a big difference as long as you get into the habit of them. So I know we were going to talk about psychological armoring.
Yes.
There's lots of different ways to do that. But since it's Sunday, I decided earlier as I was preparing for this conversation to take a look in the Bible. There is a blueprint for how to deal with psychological armoring. And that is in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18. So if I could have liberty, if you just let me cook for a minute, I'll read this.
Please do.
What it says. Okay. All right. So it talks about the armor of God. So psychological armor and putting on the armor of God. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. Sounds like a toxic culture, right? Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything to stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with you, which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all of the Lord's people. So I want to just focus real quickly on verse 18, to pray all the time and all kinds of occasions. Always keep praying for the Lord's people, not only people who are around you, people at your job, pray for yourself, right? Every day that an opportunity will present itself, that you'll have discernment, you can make the right decision at the right time. We talked earlier about the fear of, I might make the wrong decision, or I put myself in some kind of financial harm. Will you really? Will you make a decision to put yourself in financial harm? Probably not. You will probably do everything that you need to do in order to protect yourself, to move out of this toxic culture and into a more successful one.
Yeah.
There. But let's go back real quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say something really quickly? Okay. So it just made me think about something. So for us as Black women, many of us are planners and we're on top of our game. Okay. So what makes us think that in this process of leaving a toxic job that we wouldn't be on top of our game again?
Right. Why would you think that?
Right. That's just rational thinking. That's the mind F, right?
Toxicity, right?
Yes.
Bleeding in. That's absolutely what it is.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. So what I love about this, it gives us great examples of how to do this, right? So if we start going top to bottom, this is in scripture a way to approach a toxic culture, to think about it from a military preparation, putting armor, shielding our vulnerable parts. And there are ways to do this. So one of the first ways, going top to bottom, is putting on the helmet of salvation. So just like we were talking about, as you are doing your hair and makeup in the morning, monitor what your thoughts are, right? Because a lot of times those negative thoughts about what we can't do will start really early in the day.
Yeah.
As we prepare to go to work, we know the environment, we know the negative culture that we're going into, and that kind of stuff will start to be plugged in. And before we know it, it will happen habitually in our morning routine. So being mindful that those messages are coming in and having some way to combat them. So that could be something like an affirmation. when you're putting on your makeup, having a message on the board right there in the mirror for you. I remember having something like that that's actually still in my bathroom mirror today. I heard Mara Brock Akil years ago in an interview say, I will find a way to get what I want. And I took out a tube of lipstick and wrote that on my mirror. I will find to get what I want. And if I want to get out of this toxic culture and I don't see it right now, I will find a way to get out of it, right? That's that helmet of salvation. So as you're prepping, you're thinking about those things. Second, we're moving down the body, the breastplate of righteousness, having an armor, right? They would put a shield of armor over their chest. You know, people who wear armor, police officers who wear bulletproof vests over their core, right? Over their heart, over their lungs, the things that give them air, things that, the organs that function in their body. So covering your chest with that, covering yourself, like we said earlier, being careful about who you share your plans with. Right?
Yes.
Protecting that, protecting your peace, just like I was doing. I could reward myself the fourth day of the week with something special that wasn't even a Friday. I could still go out Friday too, but I was going to reward myself with this, protecting that plan. And I kept doing it. I didn't let anything sort of dissuade me from doing that and rewarding myself. Those kinds of things are incredibly important.
Yeah.
And then number 3, the belt of truth. I love this because usually that idea of girding your loins, right? Protecting your private, your tender parts of your body with the belt of truth. And I love the idea of using that as a foundation for what's real and what's true. Sometimes when you start to share about what's happening for you at work, the toxicity that you're exposed to, the discrimination, the racial bias, all those things, people will try to convince you that's not happening.
Right.
Who don't even work there will try to tell you, girls, are you sure? You know,
Yeah.
not true, right? And they go off on this tangent. You know what it takes to do your job.
True.
You know what it takes to be successful, and you know what's happening around you. And I think, like you said earlier, Dr. Kamani, that idea of trusting ourselves, calling a thing, and seeing the reality of what's happening, and not getting dissuaded from that is incredibly important. The belt also reminds me of the Spanx that we might wear. My mom always calls it foundation. You know, your good bra, your girdle, putting those things on under your clothes to be prepared for the day. That real armor that kind of holds you tight, gives you a hug or a compression that helps you get through the day. And that can be the reality, right? That can be the truth that you're making a decision about moving forward. The 4th thing is the shoes of peace. Your feet shall be shod with the gospel of peace. That means, in my mind, putting on those shoes, putting on those comfortable shoes if you need to walk into work, but also making sure that you're reminding yourself that you're walking towards your goals. You're making decisions, walking towards your goals or walking away from this culture, right? Anything that you can do, little things during the day that you can do, getting your mind right so that you could be supported in making the right decisions. I remember years ago being a young woman and taking public transportation into work. I would see the train coming. There's a street level kind of streetcar here in Houston, and I would see it coming, and I had to run to the train platform. And there, I was downtown, and sometimes there would be people who were unhoused or people who were going on their way to work. A lot of times, the Black people would cheer for me as I was running. You can do it. That kind of thing, right? Hearing that, helping me in that sense, is one of the things that I would engage in as well. So then number 5 is the shield of faith, where you might need to lean on your faith as you are facing this toxic culture and making a decision to move away from it. And that can be certainly your spiritual faith, your grandmother's prayers, your family's prayers, your aunts, your uncles, all those people who love and care and support you, but also your girlfriends. That time spent, dedicated time, scheduled time with your friends, or even people who are going through something similar, and not have it not just be an opportunity to vent about how horrible things are, but more of an accountability group, making sure that they're feeding to you and encouraging you so that you can move forward. And you're doing the same from someone else, right? You're learning from their experiences as well. And then number 6 is the sword of the Spirit, or the Word of God. And in my mind, that reminds me of a conversation that I had with a coaching client just this week. It was just, the timing is impeccable. Who was a Black woman who was in a toxic culture. And she was describing to me how difficult, the history, lots of difficulty that she's been having, and feels very challenged and put upon. And it's just a real toxic culture. And I said, it sounds like you have to walk through a rough street or walk through a street fight sometimes just to get in there to do your job, right? And she's like, that's absolutely right. And I said, that also reminds me then about having to keep something in your pocket, keeping a weapon in your pocket. Now, I'm not telling you, I'm not saying any of your listeners to carry a weapon into work. I didn't say that. Carry any kind of knife or anything like
You're not saying that. Yes.
Spiritually, have a spiritual knife in your pocket, right?
Yes.
What does that do? That's going to cut through some of that BS that's coming at you constantly because you're already prepared and you can see it for what it is. Yeah. And also it won't get embedded, right? Because you're able to slash it and get it out of your way. And it's about setting a boundary there for you. And it'll cut all of that fat, all of that confusion, all of that drama out, and hopefully establish a clear path for you. And that's like setting that boundary. So that's how I like to think of it. And I think that could be a formula to help you get to walk out of a toxic culture.
Wow. Okay. So many things you said. Okay. So I'm going to elaborate on the several things you said. One is, I loved how you said it too. It's beautiful. So the first thing is we have to arm ourselves spiritually. So ground ourselves in our spiritual faith and just remember, why we're here. We're not here to be suffered and, or being abused at a job. No, that's not why we're made. And remember whose we are, right? Whose we are and who we are. Okay. We have to remember that even though we're in these jobs and they might treat us like crap or treat us that we're less than, we have to remember that's not who we are. Okay. And do not spend that energy trying to fight people to prove who you are, because they will never, ever, ever give you your flower. They won't do that in a toxic environment because they're intimidated by you because of their insecurities. And I want to quote my friend Colette Elizabeth, who said that a sign of a poor leader, I hope I get it right, insecure. She said those three qualities: insecure, immature, and oh my God, Colette, I forgot the other one. Insecure, immature. Colette, help me out. I can't remember what the other one was. So those three qualities really highlight a lot of people in our work environments actually are, incompetent, right? Incompetent, insecure, immature, right? And so you might see these qualities in people around you. So those people will never acknowledge you. And they might, yes, thank you, Colette. They may actually see you more of a threat and try to do things to kind of push you out. So that's the first important thing, is that we know our worth, right? Really? So I want to quote Carolyn, who was a therapist who came on, and she talked about, as we are going through these environments, as we acknowledge the fear, that a way that we can process that is to connect to our breath. Yes. And it is to breathe in faith and breathe out fear. Breathe in faith and breathe out fear. And I invite us to think about, all of us have gone through worse situations than been in a toxic job. Okay. So I invite us to think about, what are those situations and how do we rise up from that? If you were able to rise up from those situations, right, you can rise up from that. And that was probably scary stuff you had to deal with, but you did it. And so that's an example. That's like data that shows you that you are able to rise and you are able to figure things out, right? You can get plans together. You can get resources together. So again, like we were just talking about, Dr. Gia, you might think, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know where to start. But more than likely, you're not just going to just up and do something anyway. You're going to be strategic in your exit planning, right? The other thing that you said that I really appreciated, you talked about walking towards your goals.
Yes.
So for us to keep in mind as we connect to our worth, that we might see this job might serve us some benefit. Okay. So it might provide us some financial resources for a time being and health insurance, all that kind of stuff, right? It may also provide us with different job experiences that we can use as we pivot out, different connections, different skills, different trainings. So there's things that the job might provide for you, and it might not be all bad. And I want to say this too, when you're in a toxic job, some people might feel like, well, how do I know my job is toxic? I mean, there's things that I'd like and things that I don't like. And I just say to people, if it's harming you in some way, it's toxic. Okay. There could be parts you like about it, whatever. that does not mean it's not toxic. It can still be toxic because I could still look at the job that I had and say, you know what, I got a lot out of that job. You know, I
Right.
made some really good connections and, you know, I got my student loans forgiven. Like I got all these great things from
Right.
that toxic job. Would I want to go back? Absolutely not. Right. But I invite Black women as you're watching this video to think about what are your goals and how has that job maybe helped you connect to your goals, but that's not the only place, right? It's a time limited thing. Get what you can from that job and
Yeah.
still move on, right? So think about it, it's like a bridge. It's a short-term experience, but it's taking you a bridge to somewhere else, okay? So keep that in mind.
And can I add something real quick? I love what you're saying about that because sometimes I hear from people, I don't know what I want. I don't know what to do because they're so overwhelmed, you know, and so hurt by what's happening in the present. They can't think about what to do in the future. And I think sometimes that can also be a gift in that toxic culture if we can recognize it as one. It might not tell you exactly what to do next, but it'll let you know what you don't want. And you can start to list, I don't want a job where I'm treated X, Y, and Z. I don't want a job, you know, with this is happening. You put all of that in a list and that lets you know what you don't want. So as you are applying and as you're looking, you're not looking for that. Right. You're looking for something the opposite of that as a place to start. And that's what really can help.
Yeah. And you just made me think about something else. I've actually met Black women who've said to me, as a result of this toxic job, this has really taken my love away from this profession. Like I want out of this profession, right? And so part of the work that I've done with them is to really figure out, is it really that, or is it just the work environment? Okay. You still have a love for the work, right? The interest that brought you into the field, but it may be the work environment. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they're like, no, I just want to pivot to something different. And I support them in that. But sometimes it's really just the work environment. And I can relate to them because when I was in that work environment, I started thinking, should I be a psychologist anymore? Like, if this is what it means to be a psychologist, I don't want this anymore. Even I went through all this training and all the other kind of stuff, right? Which is so disturbing. But guess what? Once I left that job, I was like, oh, I like being a psychologist, right? Like I'm good at it. Like what? But they were starting to take away my joy about the work, right? And so now I'm reconnecting to the joy on my own terms. So I want Black women to think about that. The other thing you said, Dr. Gia, was prayer and how that's so important. Before I used to go meet with that workplace bully, every time I would have a meeting with her, I would pray. I would pray. Not that I was scared of her. I was praying that God would help me focus on what she was saying, you know, and get what I needed to get and just get in and get out. Right. But just like I would be able to just do my job, get in, get out. And that God would reveal to me. Right. So prayer was and I prayed all day when I was at the job. The other thing you talked about was knowing that we will find a way out as Black women, as Black people. We have always found a way out, even when we think about selection stuff going on, right? We have always found a way out. And so I encourage us to think about Harriet Tubman. She found a way out. And not only did she do that, she went back and got some other people, a whole bunch of people. So I encourage us to think about Harriet. So channel your inner Harriet and start making your own way, right? But as you make your own way, do not tell your coworkers, okay? Because they may want you to stay, or they may got some issues with you to even know about. Do not tell them. Now, something else you talked about was evil. And I just want to know there's evil in this world, and that in your workplace, you might be experiencing evil. It may show up in the form of insecure, incompetent, immature people, right? It may come in that form with people that you work with. But I really want us to know that we cannot let these people steal everything from us. We can't let them steal our physical health, our mental health, our dreams we might have about our profession. We can't let them do that to us. And I remember when I would be driving to work. So on my way to work, I would have like a playlist, like a pump up playlist. So one of the songs I would listen to was a song by Jill Scott, and she talked about that she has to go and stare monsters in the face. How I
Mm.
felt when I would get
Yeah.
there. I would have to stare at monsters in the face. Not all of them were bad, right? But I would have
Mhm.
to stare some monsters in the face and kind of like play it off.
Yeah.
But the message in that song and the message that I took away from that was I have to constantly get ready. I have to prepare
Mhm.
myself. Like each day, what
Mhm.
am I doing to prepare myself to get out that place, right?
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Gia, Black women who are watching this,
Mhm.
they may say, what you guys are saying is all fine and good, but that's not gonna really relate to me.
Yeah.
I just, that must sound nice for you guys, but
Mhm.
I can't leave this job because I got uh, kids in
Yeah.
college, and maybe I'm a single mother, or I'm responsible for people.
Mhm.
Right? So I could hear some Black women even watching this
Yeah.
right now could have this kind of perspective like, yeah, I can't even hear what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I hear you, right? Because it can sometimes feel overwhelming or feel like it doesn't represent all of our interests or all of our needs. Well, I would just encourage you then to take what you can from it, right? Decide in what way it can be helpful to you until the situation can change. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, listening, praying, affirming, all those things. I remember when I would run to the train, catch my breath on the train, get off of the train, walk those 2 or 3 blocks to the job, I'd be listening on repeat to Kanye West's Jesus Walks remix, right? Because of everything that was in that. And sometimes all I needed to hear was the refrain of him saying, Jesus walks with me. There are other ways that people say, I saw a quote by Maya Angelou just recently that said, when you go into a difficult situation, bring your people with you. Bring your
Yes.
mother with you. Recognize that when you're taking a step, that's her prayer that she said for you years ago. And if you think about people down your family line and all the things that they had to face, all of the adversity, they were in situations as well they felt like they couldn't get out, but their idea of you was that way to cope with it. So whatever you need to do in order to cope with until you have an opening, and there will be something at some point that you'll be, maybe it'll just be moving your desk away from someone else. Maybe it'll be, doing some work for another department at that same organization. But if you pray for that discernment and you
Mhm.
ask God to guide you and present an opportunity in your path, I am certain that you will get it.
Yeah, yeah. And your plan could be next month, 3 months, 6 months, a year,
18
2,
months. It
right?
could be.
It's
Yeah.
up to you about what your plan is. Girl, when you say Kanye West, I used to listen to one of his songs too, girl, about I don't know the name of it, but he was like, he got this job, and at first he was like the pet, right? They were like, oh, let's the black employee, let's highlight the black employee. And then he was like, why am I working this job? Like, I'm not getting nothing from this job. I will play that on repeat. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that is hilarious. Okay, hilarious.
It's all around us. These opportunities are all around us. And
Yes,
if you think about it from a spiritual perspective, you are encouraged and protected and validated all the time. You can see it on television, you can hear it in the music, you can hear it from people who are, who love and encourage you. And even in this conversation, you can replay this on repeat, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Absolutely.
And something else you said made me think about something. You talked about our ancestors
Yeah,
and what they went through for us to even be here. And
absolutely.
so I invite us to think about what would our ancestors want for us? Like, would
Yes.
they want us to stay in jobs where we're being harmed
Hmm.
and we have opportunities? Like,
Hmm.
they didn't have they had
Hmm.
to stay and
Yeah.
deal with that crap, right? We don't have to. So
Hmm.
I always think about too, like, what would our ancestors want for us? And
Absolutely.
I just kind of find it hard to believe they will want us to stay in environments where we're being harmed.
Absolutely. And I think it goes even beyond happiness. Like, certainly our ancestors, I think, would want us to be happy, but I
Yeah.
think they would also want us to use the skills and the abilities that we have cultivated, that they have toiled, that they have prayed for. They want you to be able to work at the top of your ability because, in
Yes.
so many ways, they were limited, right? They didn't have
Yes.
the opportunities. They had someone literally and figuratively on their necks, right, about their job or their job performance. And they want you and us and me together all to be able to do the things that we have the ability to do. And sometimes you have to follow a line of curiosity to find that. but they
Yeah.
want that for you. We all want that for each other.
Yes, yes, yes. I was thinking about ways that people at the job might make us think that we're lucky to have this job or whatever. And our ancestors, what they would tell us is, here they go again trying to exploit our
Mhm.
labor. Right.
Absolutely.
So see it for
Absolutely.
what it is. See it for what it is. So
Absolutely.
we think about the psychological armoring. We think about the
Mhm.
planning as we try to walk through the fears. So let's talk a little bit about how therapy can be very important during this process. And what are some of the in the moment coping strategies that we can utilize? Let's say somebody says something and we just want to say something to them, but we know, oh, this would not look good if I said what I really want to say. So let's talk about the mental health in terms of therapy. And
Right.
then also, what do you do in that moment where they are really working your nerves? They're really disrespecting you. Like maybe they're just calling you out of your name, or they're gossiping about you, or they're micromanaging you, or they're belittling you in some kind of way. How
Mhm.
can what are some psychological tips that we can give to Black women if they're in those situations?
Absolutely. Such good questions. Well, first, I just want to go back quickly and talk about the benefit of having a mental health provider, having a
Yes.
therapist, and having an executive coach. And especially if those people are Black women, right? Especially if they are Black women, not only for Black women clients, but for everyone who can benefit from having the knowledge, skills, ability, training that Black women have acquired in these roles to be mental health providers and
Yes.
executive coaches. The opportunity to be able to break it down, right? Break it down in a way that feels realistic and maybe even something that you can join shoulder to shoulder in a shared experience. Someone who's not going to invalidate what
Oh,
you've experienced, question it in a way that kind of holds it up to be examined, like it's not really true or it's inauthentic in some way. And then and even also that therapist working through their own unconscious bias, right,
true.
about you and your abilities. That's why there's lots of resources now in this day and age where you can access a Black therapist, Black
Yes.
psychologist, Black executive coach to really help you make those next steps. And again, in therapy, you can learn a lot of these strategies. I love what you said earlier about being able to take a breath,
Hmm.
remind yourself who you are.
Yes.
Early in the morning when you're looking in the mirror and preparing, you're doing that affirmation, you're doing the prayer, you're looking at whatever you've written on your mirror in lipstick to remind yourself of who you are. I remember some time ago dealing with some anxiety, and certainly it would come up mostly in situations where I wasn't around anyone else. I might be, writing something or something, and those anxious thoughts would come up. I remember being able to close my mind and take a moment. It would take me probably not that long. It felt longer, like maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and visualize a couple of different things. Sometimes I would visualize my place, myself in a safe place, or something, a
Uh-huh.
place that I valued, around people who loved me. Sometimes I would visualize myself in a different job and what that would really feel like walking into it every day, what it would smell like, what I'd hear, all those
Mm.
kinds of things. Sometimes I would also visualize, really sit with the vision of me trying to draw a stop sign on an Etch-a-Sketch. You remember Etch-a-Sketch, where you had the
Yeah.
two dials and how
Yeah.
concentration it would take for you to make a design. And
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to make a stop sign, right? And then write the word stop in the middle, and how much concentration that would take, the
Hmm.
skill, and that would help me calm down. So the
Wow.
things like that in the moment where you could
Yeah.
center yourself, get some peace, have a vision of yourself doing something that will make you feel better, I think is
Yeah.
really powerful and key. And a lot of
Hmm.
times as well, as we were saying earlier about the toxic culture that's
Hmm.
spinning around us, I love what the author Elizabeth Leba says in her 2 books on I'm Not Yelling and Protecting My Peace, is
Hmm.
that a lot of times you are not dealing with imposter syndrome. You do
Mm.
not question yourself. You don't question your skills and abilities. You don't question how you've gotten into this job. The people around you keep that up and propaganda. You actually don't feel that way, but you're influenced by the environment that makes you think that you are an imposter because that's what's being validated. And that's not even true for you. But
Yeah.
because you're in that environment, you are being influenced, kind of like that smog in the air, like you're breathing it in and out. And then all of a sudden you're starting to think that. But if you were in a different environment, you would not have that experience. So those
Yeah.
kinds of things I think are really important. So when someone is pushing a boundary with you, someone's trying to micromanage you or tell you what you should do or treating you unfairly, keep in mind people, like you said, who are immature and incompetent.
Insecure, incompetent. Yes.
They can't do any better than that, right?
Right.
They don't even have the skill set to do any better. So a lot of times it's not even personal. It's just the fact that they can't even do any better, but you can, and you can recognize it for what it
Boom.
is.
Exactly. Right. As Black people, we
Mhm.
can see the writing on the wall. Right?
Absolutely.
Like we're able to see through things like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. Like I peeped that, right? But what's so
Yeah.
crazy is they don't think that we have, right?
Right.
We've already peeped it. So if you peep the situation, start planning. Okay. Now, some things that you said,
Mhm.
girl, which I really appreciated. You talked about how therapy can be very important to
Mhm.
provide a space for us to be able to talk about what we're going through, right? And a way where we can talk to someone who's objective. Because when
Right.
we talk to our family and friends, a lot of times they don't, they have from a different perspective
Mhm.
sometimes, and they're not objective at all, right? And so they may have their own issues, their own projected fears onto you, which is not helpful at all. Okay. And it's just better to talk to a therapist, okay? Because that person's just like listening to you. They're able to hear like connections. They're able to look at other issues in your history
Mhm.
and how it
Mhm.
makes it difficult for you to move forward with this fear, right? But they can also be there with you to walk through the fear of leaving. The other
Right.
thing is the benefit of having a good Black woman therapist is that lived reality, you don't
Mhm.
have to explain it. You don't have to
Right.
explain it,
Right.
right? So, like, my clients might say something, I'm like, "Girl, yeah, I know, right, right." And we have this way, right? Because I know what they're talking about. Not that we all alike, but we have some similar lived experiences.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The other thing is, I've had clients come to me and say, you know what, I had to break up with my previous
Mhm.
therapist who did not look like us
Mhm.
because I told them what was happening to me and they did like this racial gaslighting thing.
Yes.
Are you sure it was? I mean, maybe. I mean, why would they do that? Why, that kind of stuff, right? You don't need that in therapy. You need somebody who
Mhm.
can believe you and you can reality test. So
Mhm.
if you experience that, you can break up with your therapist. You
Oh,
can. Okay.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
please don't feel like, oh, therapy doesn't work. I'm done with therapy. If your therapist doesn't get it, even if
Mhm.
it's another Black person, if you
Yeah.
don't connect with them, break up with your therapist.
Find
Okay.
another
Find
one.
a therapist. Yes. And I
Mhm.
have a video about how to find a therapist, how to find a
Good.
Black therapist. Okay. So there's resources available to you. If you have health insurance, you can go to your
Mhm.
health insurance provider. There's also
Mhm.
Psychology Today, and there's like videos of the different therapists. So you kind of get a vibe of them. There's therapy for Black girls, there's Black
Mhm.
therapists.
Mhm.
There's the Loveland Foundation,
Mhm.
which provides free therapy resources for Black women.
Mhm.
And I'm a Loveland therapist, so I know that they do this.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's so many resources available to us. So again, you may need to break up, but that lived in experience and knowing that you know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
so much easier. The other thing is, when you talked about like what to do in
Yeah.
the moment, when it would be so outrageous with the workplace bully, I used to think of this song from Big Sean, and it was, you talk about inappropriate, okay? But I was singing that song in my head while she was talking like
Yeah.
nonsense, or she was acting a fool, and I'm just playing this Big Sean song in my head. You know what I'm saying? Like I really want to say to her, okay. So that might be helpful also if you're in this situation and you're like hearing and dealing with this stuff at Toxic Job. What song can you replay? I was thinking about, do you remember Ally McBeal? Do you remember that show, Ally McBeal? So remember when she used to like see like dancing
Dancing
babies
baby.
right? Like visualization. So I would kind of do that at the job too. Like,
Yes.
how do I kind of take me away from this stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And do you remember Allie's therapist who talked about her having a theme song, right? Like have a theme song, have a song that you go to. And in that way, as you're trying to think of your song, you can even visualize going into your pocket for your spiritual knife, right? Like this
Oh,
is what I'm going to use as my defense. Is
yes.
this song, is this idea. And sometimes you have to take a breath and focus on actually like what it would feel like me putting my hand in my pocket in those seconds. That'll
Yeah.
help you calm down, right?
Yes. And therapy will help you take off that mask at the end of the day. So when you go into your job, many times you're wearing a mask, trying to contain yourself. Like, hey, how you doing? And it's so exhausting. It is so exhausting. So when you're in therapy, they will show you how to take off the mask.
Yeah.
Okay. And the hope is that you will find job situations or employment situations, professional opportunities where you don't have to wear the mask. Okay. Not
Absolutely.
like that. Because that can make you hard to breathe. Okay.
And I love,
So, yes, go on.
can I just interject you? I love what you're saying about the idea of having a shared experience with a Black therapist or Black coach, and
Uh-huh.
the idea that you don't have to defend what's happening, right? And I wouldn't say that you wouldn't have to explain it, or that you wouldn't have to air it out, or that you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to put words around it, because that in itself can be quite therapeutic, right?
Yes.
Thinking
Yes.
about it, talking about it, and having that in the safe space. But I
Yeah.
think one of the points I'd like to just add to the benefit of having a Black therapist or a Black coach, in that shared experience, you have room to talk about it, right? You're not
Yes.
immediately shut down because they've had some shared experiences as well. They've likely had, some similar things happen to them as well.
Yeah.
So I really like that, in the sense that there will be this shared experience that leads to a sacred space that can be
Yeah.
held between the Black therapist and the Black client.
Mhm.
And that can be of great benefit. And if it doesn't work, find another one. Okay.
Move on.
If this isn't working for me, I need to find someone else. It doesn't mean that all Black therapists are bad, or all Black therapists are not the right fit for you. It just means you find the right one that is.
Exactly, like a relationship, right? You
Absolutely.
move on. Okay. So can you talk about the difference between therapy and coaching now? Because I think some people might not be clear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who does both, I like the idea of them being distinct professions. And even for myself, sometimes there will be some integration on certain skills or modalities, but for the most part, they are two different things. So the way I like to think of it is, as in therapy, someone is coming to me with a problem. That could be a deficit, that could be a mental health disorder, it could be an adjustment issue. Something is happening, usually that's affecting their mood, their behavior, their sleep, their relationships, their ability to communicate, all of those things. And as a psychologist, a licensed psychologist, I am looking for those places where I can help make some change for them.
Mhm.
But a lot of times that's going to look like me leading the session as the doctor, me doing the dosing, me identifying and breaking down and labeling sort of what's happening, diagnosing the problem, and then enacting a plan. And as a coach, I am basically facilitating a conversation. I'm asking certain questions that will hopefully lead to more clarity and more strategic planning. For me, as an executive coach, that focuses on work and wellness are my areas. So someone who's a psychologist or doing therapy will be looking more at a mental health disorder, likely charging your insurance. As an executive coach, I'm looking at work-related or wellness-related situations like occupational stress that is not covered by your insurance, but hopefully supported by your job, financially supported by your job, because they want you to do well and they'll invest in the coaching. Coaching is time limited. Psychotherapy can go on for many, many years, many months, etc., forever long, until the problem is dealt with. And even sometimes the problem can morph into other areas, right? It might be more of a focus on a family of origin kinds of things, or psychoanalysis, which can last for many, many years. But coaching is more time limited in its focus. And as a coach, I am really looking at the conversation and the relationship with my coaching client as them being in charge. As a psychologist, I'm really in charge of that.
Mhm.
But as a coach, I'm looking at my client being in charge. I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with them, or even a little bit behind, as they are getting us talking about what their goals are. They're the ones that are looking out the windshield of perhaps a plane. They're the pilot. I'm the co-pilot. And, you're saying that my goal is to leave my job in the next 18 months. And as your co-pilot, I'm saying, all right, well, let's make the flight plan. What do we need to do in order for you to be able to get there? And we start off, we take off, but all of a sudden you say we're heading to Los Angeles and we're veering towards Minneapolis. I'm wondering why, right? I'm asking, going back at the flight plan and saying,
And accountability too, right?
exactly. You said we were heading this direction. What's happening?
Right.
Why are we changing course? And I
Yes.
think doing that through a series of asking questions. It's less about me giving advice, but more about facilitating a conversation that increases awareness. That's what I
Uh-huh.
like to think about it.
So how can a Black woman distinguish if she needs therapy or coaching?
Great question. A lot of different ways. I like to start with, where is the problem as you see it? Is it at work? Is it at home? Is it in your relationships? Is it in your health? What seems to be the biggest driver? And I'll also say this, Dr. Kamani, I think a lot of times people will talk to their family and friends before they come to a mental health
True.
provider or an executive coach. And that's
Yeah.
fine. I think it's important that you also ask them, what do you think I complain about the most? Like, what do you think is going on with me? What are you hearing me say? So they can give you that feedback. Girl, you are constantly complaining about your job and so-and-so at this job, and you think you made the decision, all of that. Or I think it's the relationship. I think that, your primary relationship with so-and-so is really influencing your behavior, your drinking, your overeating, or whatever that is, right? Those kinds of things can help you start to separate that. If you've had ever any longer standing symptoms of anxiety, depression, things that are affecting your sleep, you're having bad dreams, you've had a traumatic incident in your life, those kinds of things, I would think you might want to start with a psychologist first or a therapist first. In my experience, usually a good ethical coach will tell you what their limits are first. If they see a lot of psychological or psychiatric problems, they will say, sure, we can continue with coaching as long as you have a mental health provider on board. Or they may say, I don't think that coaching is the right time. This is the right time for you. I think you need to get psychotherapy first. I have found probably more in my experience that a therapist will cover a lot more than a coach will. So they'll be less likely to say, I think you just need coaching around it, or like to just continue to see you as a therapy patient.
Yeah. And I would say be very mindful, because sometimes, not all, but sometimes you might have life coaches who start kind of blurring the line between therapy and coaching. So you need to be very mindful of really who you're working with. Are they focusing on coaching, or is it starting to have like this therapy element? You need to be mindful of that, because from my understanding, life coaches are not licensed, right?
Right. So that's a great way to think about it. I was just about to say, another way that you should start is with anyone that you're going to meet with, asking them, what strategies do you use? What treatment modalities do you use? How were you trained? A lot of times people will have that on their website. You can even look up, an accredited program if you're so inclined to do that. I would be very careful about someone who doesn't know what their limits are and will say, oh, I can do any and everything for you. I think there was even something in the news within the past year and a half, where one of the celebrities, I think it was SZA, was having like a panic attack. And in the moment called her coach, who was a life coach, and told her, I don't know what to tell you. Because it wasn't a therapist, it wasn't a psychologist, right? It wasn't a therapist. It was someone who basically just took the title of coach. And it was not beneficial to her in that moment. So you need to be very, very careful about where you're spending your time and your money on people who are advising you, and making sure they can articulate to you ethically what their treatment modality is. And someone who's not able to do that, or just says, oh, it's supportive, or I just do what you want. Well, I would encourage you to think carefully about that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. So what we're talking about is that therapists are licensed.
Yes.
So we are governed by a licensing body within our state. Right. So that if there's an issue, you can go to this governing body.
Absolutely.
But life coaches are not, right? So just do your research. So can a Black woman have a therapist and a coach?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think those that I've worked with who have both are probably doing the best out of everyone, especially if there are concerns that they're dealing with sort of beyond the surface of work and wellness and occupational stress. If there's more long-term traumatic kinds of things that have happened, those are things that most coaches, even well-trained coaches, are not necessarily going to be able to rectify the time that they have with you. And so even like for myself as an executive coach, I'm someone who has a lot of credentials in a lot of different areas, but credentials in training. And there are people who will get additional certifications in coaching so that you know that they practice ethically. Now, for me, someone who's a licensed psychologist and an executive coach, my ethical responsibilities as a licensed psychologist outweigh any that I can gain as an executive coach. So,
Right.
I'm licensed by the state board. Those are the people who monitor my services,
Yes.
and after me if something happened that you could file a complaint with, etc. And I have to do continuing education and a whole bunch of things to maintain my license. And because I have both of those, again, I know where my limits are in my current practice and can
Yeah.
articulate those quite well for anyone who would ask.
So somebody might be thinking, so can my therapist be my coach? What would you say to that?
They might, they might be a licensed provider who's gotten some credentials in coaching. They might be a licensed provider who doesn't have a lot of respect for coaching. It just sort of depends on that person, their training, and the way that they approach coaching. You don't necessarily have to have two distinct people, because I know there are sometimes people who do the same. But I would also say, though, I think the people who do that most successfully will tell you, all right, this is a situation where I'm not your therapist, I'm your coach now, right?
Yeah.
And it will feel distinctly different in the way that they provide that modality. So like for executive coaching, what I'm trained in is co-active coaching. Well, that's where I'm doing a lot of sort of interdependence in the session. I'm relying upon what you're saying. I'm relying upon your experience and really drawing that out. So again, that you're setting the flight plan, where someone who maybe is not following that would just be giving you advice, right? Just listening to what you're saying and telling you what to do based upon their own experience or maybe something else.
Okay.
So just again, really, really important to be mindful of that.
Okay. So how would a Black woman find a good coach, and how would they know what kind of coach they need? Because you mentioned you're an executive coach. So tell us what an executive coach is, and how would a Black woman go about finding an executive coach or any coach?
Sure. So it's starting with executive coaching. Again, an executive coach is going to be focused on workplace performance. So sometimes we're called performance coaches, coaches who focus on occupational stress, something that has to do with work. And again, probably the easiest way for you to do it is to turn to your employer and ask for an executive coach. A lot of times there will already be people who are contracted with your organization or your company who can provide coaching services. They've already been vetted by your company, and more than likely your organization will pay for a number of sessions for you, especially if you're someone who is on a track for promotion, moving up and taking more responsibility. The organization generally knows they've invested a lot of time and energy in you. Replacing you would be quite expensive, losing all of your knowledge, skills, and abilities in your life experience. So they'll double down and pay for that coaching with folks that they already have vetted, they've already approved. And that's probably the easiest way to get an executive coach. Now, if you're someone who wants a life coach, again, sometimes organizations will contract with life coaches because they might be bought for a little cheaper than a psychotherapist or an employee assistance program. And again, these might be people with varied levels of experiences or training. And it just sort of depends on what you want. So life coaching has more to do with sometimes about making decisions for life development, family planning, relationship development, those kinds of things. You can also get coaches that focus just on wellness, coaches that focus on fertility, coaches that focus on exercise. Coach is a coach probably for anything. And there's probably, I would say, the easiest way to get started is to ask your employer what resources they have for coaching. Now, certainly you can go to the International Coaching Federation. There's a list of coaches as well there who are certified through the International Coaching Federation. That's a good place to start as well, because a lot of people will already be vetted there and have gone through rigorous training and examination in order to be certified by the ICF. So that's another place to start as well. And also keep in mind, a lot of times excellent coaches will decide not to do some of those certifications for other reasons. Like my reason, I am already a licensed psychologist. So I'm being vetted by that industry, and those things are so similar that I've decided just to stick with that. So there's lots of opportunities to do that. And surfing the web, right? Listening to videos, watching things on LinkedIn, or other platforms where coaches are talking about their experiences and finding the person who feels to be the best fit for you.
So what happens if a Black woman is at her job, the employer says, oh, I have an executive coach for you, right?
Mhm.
but she really wants to go. Like she really wants an exit plan,
Mhm.
right? So what is confidentiality in that
Mhm.
situation
Mhm.
for the Black woman and her employer and the coach?
Mhm.
And what if the Black woman really wants the executive coach to help her plan for her career outside of the job?
Now, you can always, of course, ask your organization for the list of coaches that they have on tap. And if it doesn't feel comfortable to you for whatever reason, maybe there isn't anyone who's of color, there isn't any Black people who are coaches, or you want to keep it private. You don't even want the risk or the width of them knowing what your plans are. You can always go private, right? You don't have to let anybody know that you have a coach, but you have to be willing sometimes to pay out of pocket for that.
Okay.
Um, and then as well, let's say if there isn't someone who's of color, you feel like there isn't a good match or someone who can be representative of your needs, you can let the employer know. I'd really like for you all to include a more diverse list. What can we do to do that? I found a couple of people here on my LinkedIn search that I'd like for you to you have a lot of power in that situation as well. Because again, if you are someone who is a rising star at work and maybe the culture is one where you can kind of get past some of those things and you want to maintain the job wants you to stay, you have some muscle, right? You have some power in order to ask for those things at that time. But I would say with any coach, when you get started, make sure you have a very clear understanding of what confidentiality and privacy looks
Yeah.
like. I'm someone who contracts with different organizations to provide in-house coaching for their folks. And I will typically start at the beginning with explaining to the person who brought me on, whether that's the organization, the direct supervisor of the person, whoever that is, what the expectations are. And this is a habit I got into as a licensed psychologist. I am not the harborer of secrets. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to put someone in a situation where they're going to be unsafe or I'm going to be unsafe. But it's just important for us to know where those limits are. Now, as a licensed psychologist, I think it's something I'm always going to act on and we'll have to disclose if you want to hurt yourself or hurt someone else. We're always going to be careful. We're always going to be safe. You have a spiritual weapon, not an actual one, right? So let me just reiterate that, right?
Yes.
Safety is paramount, and that's my ethical obligation as a licensed psychologist. But as a coach, there might be times where a conversation needs to be had between me and your boss. And it might be perfectly suitable for you to be there, or it might be more important or suitable for you not to be there. But it'll be very clear amongst the 3 or 4 of us, whoever it is, that we are clear about what the expectations are. Sometimes there will be meetings that will take place, quarterly with your boss. I might get 360 evaluations, people from your team or people who you report to or people who report to you to add in and give me some information. It'll be helpful in setting that flight plan, right? That strategic plan to help you move forward. But we'll be very clear about that first before anything is shared that would be inappropriate or confidential.
Okay, so the takeaway is if your employer is paying for the coach, executive coach, you need to be clear about confidentiality.
Absolutely.
What is the coach going to be sharing with your employer? All that. And if you have concerns about that, then private pay,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Have several conversations about it first and know where you're spending your money and your time. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So as we're winding down, Dr. Gia, if there's a Black woman watching this right now and she's at a toxic job, she might be experiencing the Sunday scaries if she's watching this on a
Yes.
Sunday because she knows she has to go back to her job on Monday.
Mhm.
If she's experiencing this feeling like, oh, I can't stand this job, but I'm scared about leaving. I'm scared
Mhm.
about leaving, and I'm scared that last stuff we talked about before, that I'll end up in a just as bad situation, or I won't be able to pay my bills. What am I going to do about retirement? What am I going to do about my
Mhm.
health insurance? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What words of wisdom can you offer to
Mhm.
her?
I have a couple of things. First, I would say since it's Sunday and we've been talking about scripture, I'll add one more that God did not give you a spirit of fear, right? He gave you a sound mind, He gave you power, gave you love. So you have the ability to make the right decision for you at the right time. If you are fearful, if you are worried that you won't be able to handle whatever the outcome is, recognize that for what it is. It might be an opportunity for you to get more information so that you can feel more centered and less anxious. But that is not who you are at your core. At your core, you know what to do and you can make the right decisions for you at the right time, whenever that is.
Yeah.
And then another thing I'll say, also keep it in scripture, is that where there 2 or 3 are gathered, right? God is amongst those people. So in this wonderful conversation, Dr. Kamani, you and I have been talking about a lot of strategies, how to deal with the toxicity in the culture, to deal with the fear. You and I have come to agreement on a lot of different things. So anyone who was watching or listening, you're added now into that midst of 3. And we are all working on this together. And I know a lot of times that fear can be overwhelming, and it can sometimes feel like your faith is decreased or compromised. And if you're in those situations, just know you can lean on ours, because we both believe that it can be made better, right? As survivors of toxic culture. And as you said, someone who's interviewing tons of people who have been through toxic cultures and survived them and never regretted, never looked back, kept moving forward. They have been the benefit of making that decision and moving forward. So the last thing I'll just say, you've heard that quote, when you're going through hell, keep going. Don't get stuck. Don't let it be something that keeps you away from your goal. Now, accept the fact, though, that sometimes it can take longer than you might want it to. It might take longer than what feels comfortable, but you can use every single day that's available to you to take a step towards your goal. Do something towards your goal, even if it's just listening to this YouTube video again, or listening to a podcast, or getting encouragement from someone, or stopping at your coffee shop, or whatever it is in your routine or your way to work, when they give you encouragement and they ask about how you are. Like, those are all things that can add into sort of that toolbox, right? Listening to your music, Jesus Walks, whatever it is, that can help you move forward in that. If you have a few minutes during the day to daydream about what it would be like to be in a different situation, and when you're ready to take a step, to get a therapist, to get a coach that can help you move it even a step further, just recognizing you are moving towards that goal. And what a wonderful opportunity that is, that you have the right and the opportunity to make a different decision. That's amazing that you can do that.
Yes, that's so encouraging. So encouraging, so encouraging. So I want the audience to also know that this community here is here to support you. And even if we're not directly with you, me, Dr. Gia, anybody who's in this community, that we're all rooting for you. And we all know what it's like to feel the fear. And as you're walking through the fear, know that you're part of a community who is supporting you in this process, right? And it's supporting you as you're starting to exit plans, you start getting your stuff together. The quote, get ready so you don't have to be ready. Okay, so start getting ready so you can be ready when you're ready to pivot out. But know you have support. You are not alone. Sometimes we're in these situations, these toxic jobs, and that's why I started my YouTube channel too, was not only a way to process my grieving and trauma, all that kind of stuff, the toxic job, but to let Black women know that we're not alone. So feeling the fear, you're not alone. It's okay to feel the fear. But what we're saying is that you could still move forward. And as you move forward, that the fear might be telling you, get your plan together, get your plan together. And there might be little things you do every day. So it might be prayer. It might be listening to the song. It might be moving your body. It might be watching my YouTube videos. Sometimes watching my videos and hearing about the experience of other Black women and myself might help you see this is possible. It is possible for me. If somebody would have told me 3 or 4 years ago that I would be on YouTube talking about this, I would be like, no, what are you talking about? I wouldn't be doing this. It is possible for you. Okay. It really is. I'm telling you, it is. Okay. So Dr. Gia, as we are about to close, I'm going to read the community chat. Can you please share with the audience about services that you offer and how you can be contacted?
Absolutely. So again, I'm an executive coach. I'm based in Houston, Texas, but now with the technology that we have, I can reach people all over the country and internationally. My website is right there under my name, giarrito.com. That's where you can get a lot of information about all the services that I provide. But I love working individually with Black women that maybe need to perfect or gain leadership development skills such as communication or decision making, or those who are dealing with occupational stress and there's a concern for their well-being. Those are really my areas that I like to work very deeply in. Right now, the best way to reach me is not only through my website, but I like to post on LinkedIn quite often, you can follow me or reach out to me with a direct message there. And then something I'm thinking about doing in the next few weeks as we get into the new year is starting a blog. So I'll be putting some links on LinkedIn, but it'll likely be housed in Substack. So if you also want to follow me there, I'll be talking a lot about work, occupational stress, and wellness in those settings.
Okay. So is that information is available now, or that would be available at the beginning of the year?
Go ahead and start following me on LinkedIn, and as soon as it drops, you'll be the first one to know.
Yes. Okay, check it out. So I'll put all of Dr. Gia's information description section. So I'll see a lot of hellos. And again, please give this video a thumbs up so that YouTube will suggest this video to other Black women. My favorite scripture, Ephesians 6. It says regular daily prayer. Thank you for sharing. Yes, Dr. Gia, put the full armor of God and get your paperwork underway. Hey, Mara. Let's see. I really appreciate this. It's so helpful. I use a sword and the spirit to clean up my workplace before I arrive. My visual is me wearing each piece of armor. It protects my peace, allows me to stay confident and to be courageous and true. That's beautifully stated. Yes. When I left the toxic job plantation, I started to love Sundays again. Yes, me too. Right. So Sundays used to be the worst day of the week for me. Now I love Sundays. It's like a happy day. Right. So yes, reclaim your life. Reclaim, I just can't imagine God would ever want us to dread any day of our lives. Okay. So reclaim that. Oh yes, this quote. I love this. Walk like you've got 10,000 ancestors walking behind you. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Dr. Kimani's YouTube channel and all the wonderful guests brings encouragement. This conversation is our path to the North Star. Yes, it is. High five. Yes, that is exactly true. That is exactly true. They don't have the brilliance to see our brilliance. They don't have the capacity to see our brilliance, let alone acknowledge it. Yes. Because that shines a light that they are the imposters, right? You talk about imposter syndrome. They're the true imposters because they don't want to be revealed that they are incompetent, insecure, and
immature.
Yeah, immature. Yeah, insecure. Yeah. They're all those things, right? So they don't want all the eyes. They don't want to reveal that, right?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Hey, Carolyn. So Carolyn's here. I quoted her before about breathing in faith and breathing out fear. So thank you, Carolyn, for joining. I'm an LCSW and did executive coaching on Wall Street through an EAP. Excellent. Hello again, sisters. I'm late. I'll catch you on the replay. Yes. Thank you for joining. Would an executive coach provided by the company be expected to share updates on your progress with the employer? I think we talked about that, right?
And I would say yes, right? If they're paying for you, and they might have some, they definitely have some skin in the game, but they might even have some expectations that you meet certain markers. Again, that should all be fleshed out in the beginning. How often the coach will be updating your employer, and to what degree, and maybe even some things that you don't want them to say. All that should be worked out with your coach.
Good conversation. The executives on Wall Street didn't want therapy, so we would work with their belief systems to get them not to use drugs or any other workplace issues, performance issues, etc. Wow. Let's not forget Black women are threatening in the workplace. So true, because they are so connected to the divine. Break it down and get regular downloads to give back and teach. Yes, absolutely. We have to remember that. Right. So when people start acting crazy towards us, think about, okay, I see what's happening. Why is this happening? But do not try to get clarity from these crazy people, because they will make you think that you are the problem and you are not. So don't go out doing those rabbit holes, trying to have a meeting with people, trying to clear your name, trying to get clarity. It's a trap. Please don't do that. Yes. So remember that. But I've never heard of employers paying for executive coaching. Is that something that will be requested through your EAP?
That's usually different. Usually EAP is monitored or governed by HR. It's one of the HR benefits, and most people have access to that. Not everyone will have access to executive coaching. A lot of times the organization will provide executive coaching for folks that they have handpicked for it. Usually people, again, who are going up a particular succession ladder are about to have new responsibilities or in a new leadership role if they are performing less than expected. They'll bring in a coach for that person. So it's usually not open for everyone, but if you are someone that's been targeted to move up or they're concerned about you leaving, you can ask for it and see if you can get it that way.
Okay, let me see. I work for Able2, now owned by United Healthcare, and they have therapy and coaching.
Wonderful.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, lots of telehealth companies are not contracted with coaches. Okay, okay. So everyone, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you so much to my Spelman sister, Dr. Gia. So excited to have her here again with us. So again, if you're experiencing the fear of leaving a toxic job, do not allow the fear to stop you. Allow the fear, just sit with the fear and figure out what are you fearful of. Access the resources that will help you walk through the fear. Therapy, coaching. I have resources for you as well in the description section. You are not alone. You are not alone. Okay. We understand what that feels like as toxic job survivors, but also as licensed clinical psychologists. We know that you are able to move forward. On this channel, I'm here to support you, whatever ways that I can. This community is here to support you in whatever ways that we can. So everyone, thank you again for watching. Give this video a thumbs up. Share this video with at least 2 other Black women, because if you know a Black woman, more than likely she's in a toxic job, unfortunately, and she may also be scared. She might be scared. So please share this information with her so she's able to move forward as well as we're liberating ourselves as we're going into 2025, okay? So everyone, again, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so and turn the notification bell. So I will see you later. And thank you again, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.